All right, Kingkillers, we're covering chapter 113 in this episode. Spend some time discussing Vashet and the Adem culture in this one. Vashet decides to teach Kvothe, and she starts by explaining why he is a whore. We also discover how Kvothe and Ambrose Slam Jam poetry duo begins, tell you the greatest love song lyric of all time, and let you know what Adem stand-up is like. So sit back and enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Kingkiller podcast. I'm Dan. Got with me Tim, the Tony Tolato of this podcast.
Oh, no. I will not accept that slight.
Tony that's the first time I've actually insulted you to open an episode, and I apologize. I don't like to aim low like that, but you know, I saw a dig and I took the opportunity to fucking dig.
It's too harsh. Tony Tomato is he's insistent. He comes off as a bit of a jerk with his insistences.
Yeah, he's obviously the most disliked podcaster in the game. Everybody talks about him. We, at the Spotify offices with all of our coworkers, our coworker podcasters, they all talk about the guy.
I was going to say, so you know how there's a comedian's comedian? He's the opposite of a podcaster's podcaster.
He's a jerk's jerk.
He's the all-time bestseller at the jerk store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old Tony. I haven't checked on to see where we're at. Someone asked me about that today. How we were doing against old Tony in the Shark Tank, whatever that podcast was, or the whale watch.
Oh yeah, the murder whale.
Murder whales, mysteries. Yeah, the murder whale mysteries. Yeah, the show based off of whales hunting lions. Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. No, the logical conclusion is yes. They learned how to breathe, come on land, and smack around some lions. Which is odd because I don't think there's that many lions coming up on the ocean shore.
No, they got to go inland quite a bit to get to them. But that's what those blowholes are for. So
that's what the blowholes are. Okay, all right. Well, better, more power to them. I mean, that sounds like quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, and it's that one. They're not jerks. They just shouldn't be ahead of us. But they're not jerks. That's a pretty cool show. I gotta admit, like whales hunting lions. Like I kind of want to listen to the podcast to hear about these whales hunting lions. So like them, I don't have a problem with. Tony, that guy, he started shit with us out of nowhere for no reason.
Yeah.
And I got a big problem with that guy.
It felt like a sucker punch, I didn't even see that coming.
Like, I'd never even heard of him, and all of a sudden, he's just going to be on a chart in front of us. Like, what is his problem?
Very bold.
Yeah.
Very bold. I don't
like the guy. Don't like the guy. Don't care for him. Bit of a jerk face.
I gotta say, though, like, the packs of whales murdering lions.
Really good-looking guy, though. Really good-looking. I haven't seen him, but from that voice, I can tell.
Oh, so you've heard his voice?
I have heard his voice.
Ah. Do you think you have a good ear for what the face of the voice looks like?
Yeah, like first time I heard Roseanne Barr's voice, I knew Bombshell, and I was dead on.
Yeah, well, there you go. So yeah, I guess you have that ear for it. I was gonna say though, the murdering
Gilbert
lions.
Godfrey built like a brick shit house. Like I knew it from the sound of his voice. I was like, that dude's manly man. That's a man's man right there. That's the voice of a man's man. And I was dead on. Looks like a lumberjack.
What lumberjack would look like Gilbert Godfrey?
They all do if they're real lumberjacks. Some of them, not one of those fake hipster lumberjacks that just wears the shirt.
Okay. So real frail and sinewy. I mean, that's kind of
yeah. They're little guys. They're kind of small.
Super frail.
That's yeah.
Okay.
But
Like
Gilbert Godfrey
like,
he's a big small
deathbed.
guy. He's a big small guy.
A big
like,
small.
Yeah, like
he carries
like
his frame well.
He's like at least twice your size.
Oh, okay. Yep.
But we got chapter 113 on this episode. It's called Barbarian Tongue. And in this, we get the second half of his first interaction with Vashet, where he had taken off his shirt and given her the big wooden practice sword to whip him with, and she ends up not whipping him. He called her bluff, and she begins to semi-train him, start to kind of basically a little introduction to their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she ends up being a lot cooler than I expected her to be. The beginning, though, man, is so great. I mean, the tension is about as profound as it gets. You know, it's pretty tremendous. Like, you can hear the way he describes, like, the gritty sound of dirt beneath the soles of her shoes, and how he's trying to not open his eyes, but he can't help but open them. Like, it's pretty intense, man. And because the way the last chapter ended, basically takes off his shirt, and he can hear her walking around him with the big heavy ass sword. So you're kind of like, you're waiting to see if she's going to pummel him basically to death.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this thing would break his shoulders and shit.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, it opens up really intense.
I like it where it says, like, then she brought it up to her shoulder and swung, except she didn't. It's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you stop.
Like, those two things don't, those are opposites.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you stop and kind of go back like, wait, huh? Which is really effective,
yeah.
You know, to jostle you. And then I fucking love the fine, you twiggy little skeeth. Fine, shit and onions. Put your shirt back on. You're making me cold. Shit and onions.
Yeah. I want to know how he came up with that as a saying. Like, I looked it up, and there was something on there, but it didn't look like, it was like in the Urban Dictionary, but it didn't look like a saying that people use. And so it was like, where did he come up with shit and onions? I want to know, like, what was the process where he was like, I need a good little saying for them, a good idiom. And he came up with shit and onions.
It's one of those things that, like, when I hear it, I'm like, I could see someone saying that. Like, it wouldn't shock me to find out he knew someone once that said shit and onions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, they're two pretty, really aggressive smells, right?
Yeah, so, but like, what? I don't understand, like, how it would fit into this. Like, shit and onions. Like, it's basically saying, like, God damn it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So, it's a weird one for shit and onions.
I mean, just the phrase itself is fucking silly.
Oh, I love the phrase. I love the saying. I want to start incorporating it into my lexicon of words, but I would like to hear Rothfuss explain exactly how he came up with it. Like, what was the process where he was like, okay, so they're cooking, and, you know, they're cutting up onions, and someone comes up on them and scares them, and they're like, yeah, shit and onions, man.
I think he just yelled a bunch of things.
I shit my pants while I was cutting onions. Shit and onions. Or he ate a bunch of onions, and he was like, they're like, what are you doing? He's like, shit and onions. Like, shit and onions.
I mean, well, I don't know. Picturing what you just described, that would be intense, because if you're cutting onions and your eyes are all watering, it's very uncomfortable. Then somebody, jumps and scares you, and you get really surprised. Then, as we know, when you get really surprised, you shit your pants.
Yeah.
So,
and if you were eating an onion before that, and you were literally shitting onions, you can see where shit and onions would come from shitting onions. So that's probably the etymology, is it came from shitting onions.
So here's what it is. Rothfuss eats onions like apples.
Yeah.
A couple a day. Just takes them in.
What are you doing in that bathroom, man? It's terrible. I'm shitting onions.
This is the key. This is the key to his writing process, man. Is he his whole family's like, dude, Man,
he's
got to
got
have
to
like
stop.
a guest house. He's got to have like a guest house.
Stop. He had to buy a second house because he eats so many onions and he's just destroying bathrooms.
And this is probably the thing. Like, all these people are like, "Where's the third book?" It's like, man, you don't know how much work comes into this. Like, I have to
It's not pleasant. The process is not pleasant. You would not. I started eating a whole onion before I'd write, and I don't even like onions, so it's really bothering me. Like, I don't want to eat another onion. I don't. So it's hard to get motivated to write.
Not only that, he's like, look, man, I love my family. I hate to make them uncomfortable, but it's part of the process.
I'm stripping the paint off the bathroom walls. You don't understand what I'm doing for you guys.
It's like my hands smell like onion all day. My mouth, my face, his beard is covered in onion fucking, juices and shit.
So, hey, but we got a great line from Vashet. So,
yeah, there we go. Boom.
So it all works out in the end. Just got to be patient.
It's all worth it.
But yeah, and then Kvothe goes, thank God, I said. I started to pull up my shirt back on, but it was difficult as my hands were shaking. It wasn't from the cold. Vashet saw. I knew it. You standing there like you're ready to be hanged. I knew you were ready to run like a rabbit. She stamped her feet in frustration. I knew I should have taken a swing at you. What gave me away? She demanded. Nothing. I said it was a masterful performance. Then how'd you know I wasn't going to take a crack at your skull? And he says, it's basically because if Shane wanted to, she could have, done it herself or had Kvothe read to it.
Yeah,
so
he logicked it out.
He's like, it's either initiation or, a test of my resolve.
And it turns out it was a bit of both, right?
Not so much an initiation. It was more a test of his resolve.
Yeah.
It's not really. There's not much initiation to the process. She just beat him with a fucking willow branch.
Well, I mean, I guess the reason why I say that is you would think that would be an important, to some degree, you'd want to know that about someone coming in. You got to test and find, how much will they put up with, and I guess the tactic is different depending on who the person is.
Well, that's what she was doing. It was a test of his resolve. I'm just saying, like, a ritual, is like, oh, we do this with everybody. We just beat them with a stick at the very beginning. It's just part of the fun.
Yeah, give them a big welt on their face and back, and get them real into us. Get them really appreciating what we do.
It's like, wow, you guys kind of suck.
Well, I mean, it is. To Vashet's credit, she actually does eventually. After they talk for a while, she's like, "Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't." She actually feels bad about it.
Yeah, yeah.
She's actually quite nice. I mean, the way it actually plays out, and once they start talking and everything, she's harsh. We find out about the whole the Demaru keep getting shit on everywhere, but she's pretty harsh. Well, she's what would be the word? She's consistently very upfront and blunt.
She's definitely blunt. I mean, she's definitely blunt. I think she's got a kind of fairly nuanced perspective on things. She's not quick to judge. Like when Kvothe pisses her off and she starts to swing again, go against him. She's able to she takes her time, even when Kvothe and Penta are coming up to her. She's just like, no, I make my own decisions, and I've had my own time to think about it. And she doesn't just react. She takes her time, processes the information, tries to think things through. So she's considered, but she's definitely blunt. She definitely speaks her mind. She's not shy, not even a little shy. She's very cocky. She's very, very much a match for Kvothe and her swagger.
Yeah,
but
I would say she is a good match for him to have like an introduction to this world in terms of how she approaches him and how she brings aggression initially, but then also some understanding, and then she also speaks a fluent Aturan.
Yeah,
and well, there you go with with her cockiness. She's like, "It's much better than you."
Yeah,
guaranteed, much better.
Speaking
much better than everyone. I have a better grasp on the language than anyone that's ever spoken Aturan. She comes across like Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, that I like too, where it's like, Vashet gave me a long look, curiosity playing on her face. I will admit, I've never had a student offer himself up for a vicious beating in order to prove he's worth my time. This was nothing, I said nonchalantly. Once I jumped off a roof.
That's fantastic.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, really great.
I like, too, he sits there, he explains to her, then they take a couple hours kind of talking, let the tension bleed out, and he explains why he got whipped. He wanted to give her the story, so he had a chance to explain himself, and he didn't want her thinking that he's a criminal. But yeah, it's also like, you should probably explain that Elodin story as well, because it makes you sound insane that you jumped off a roof, all because he said, all right, you want me to teach you? Fine, jump off this roof. And then you did it immediately, without question.
Remembering that is so great. Like his spin in the air where he's like, you're going to get me.
I figured out your master plan. You're not tricking me.
He just looks at him like, you are the biggest fucking idiot
I've ever seen in my life. I wonder if you're going to survive this. I doubt it. You're probably going to die for you. Right as you hit the ground, you're dead.
I wonder how Elodin would feel after that. He'd just be like, shrug his shoulders, be like, what a fucking idiot.
Yeah, that's
the dumbest. Be all broken up,
Hey, like you'd rationalize it like, well, he clearly wasn't going to last.
That was test one.
Yeah.
And it's over.
That kid wasn't going to make it in this world. He's a bit of a dum-dum.
He's a little too passionate.
Yeah.
Thinks he's a little too clever.
Like, I don't understand. He didn't even ask me jump off the roof. That's crazy. He just jumped off the roof.
To what
and
end?
Turned
what will happen?
Smirking at me.
Yeah.
Looking at me like crossing his arms, big smirk on his face, figured you out, buddy.
What's the
moron?
What's the trust exercise where you're supposed to drop back and everybody grabs you?
It's like the trust fall, except for the one where the guy falls forward.
I love it. That's what I was about to mention. That's one of my favorite. I don't know. I guess you could call it a meme, but it's just a little video where, because they all freak out. It's so great, man. He's all up there and he's all into it, and then fall the wrong way, and then he freaks the fuck out.
That had to be a setup. No one could be that stupid. They were all standing behind him.
But I mean, what's so great about it is the way that you think if it was real, it'd be like, so if this was a trust fall, everyone has to say, you're so stupid. Why? Why would you? You knew where we were.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
We all lined up behind you. You could see us do it. We didn't blindfold you and bring you into the room with a blindfold on. You were in this room with us before this started.
Well, it's not like you can't hear people. Yeah, that's hilarious, man.
Yeah, that'd be that'd be a rough one due to what if the guy was blind? That was it. And they were just, the noises were bouncing off walls. They were in a gymnasium or something.
Then they should be a little more careful.
Yeah, they definitely should be more careful with the guy.
Maybe tell him. Maybe be like, okay, we're going to do a trust fall, but you're going to fall this way. You're going to fall this way, this way.
This way. Okay, gotcha. This way. You should have specified. You didn't you just said this way. This way means forward to me.
For me. Didn't matter that I'm tapping your back. No. But I thought you meant by tapping my back, I thought you were suggesting forward.
Yeah.
Not you're the densest motherfucker on earth, man. You know what? No one should trust. There should be no trust between you and others. You're too ridiculous.
I don't like the idea of a trust fall. I'm not a trusting person. And the idea of trust, especially my friends, I'm not trusting any of you guys to catch me. You guys will let me fall just because it'll be funny.
You know what? I actually would trust strangers more than I would trust a bunch 100%. Of my friends.
Yeah, 100%. I would be way more willing to do it with complete strangers that I'd never met before than a group of my friends. I know what my friends find funny.
Not only would your friends let you fall, they'll convince strangers, no, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be great. He's gonna love it, and then they won't catch you either. And then you could step on a crack and
shatter your ankle, like get a compound fracture, and our friends would be laughing at you. Like, you klutz! Look at you, dumb idiot.
Look, you're bleeding. You can't even fall down. Yeah, what a puss. Can't even fall down, dude.
Old ass bones.
What's the man, we had that thing going for the longest time. Actually, I guess it's still going to a degree where it's like every time there's a basketball injury, it's like these guys can't roll their ankle.
Yeah.
One buddy always got so pissed about that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, dude, play soccer. You're rolling your ankle constantly. People are constantly kicking at your ankles.
It's like the tendons in my ankles have been thoroughly stretched. I've rolled my ankles so many times and never had a sprained ankle.
Yeah, it's actually quite tremendous to consider, because all those years I never had a real injury, which is kind of nuts. There's tons of people I know that like do jujitsu and shit. They're constantly breaking all kinds of things.
I broke my foot, and it was the only time I've had anything broken, and that was like I stopped the ball and had my foot on it, and I was like looking upfield, and this giant dude on our team comes running up to clear the ball out when I have it. He comes to clear it out and like toe bashes me in my foot and breaks it. And he like completely missed the ball. He just toe bashed my foot and broke my foot. It was like, what the why? Why, man? On your team, you moron.
It's also not, you're not place kicking a football. What's going on here?
And like,
who sets the ball for somebody else?
And like, and with me having the ball, it was like I'm the skilled position player where like I'm the one you would, if he had the ball, he should have been looking to give me the ball.
Yeah.
So it was like, I already have it. There's no other step needed for you. Just stay out of the way for a minute.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Now, he broke my foot. I said I couldn't play for like 6 months. I was like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm not sitting out fucking 6 months. It's like I sat out for like 6 weeks, I think.
A lot of HGH?
Yeah. No, they told me, they were like, well, it looks, it's pretty healed. Just give it another 6 months and you'll be good. It's like, well, it doesn't hurt, so I'm going to just play now.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So I risked it, and it worked out for me. Didn't re-break it. But yeah, and then
way off.
Yeah, and then she tells him, her hand brushed gently along the edge of the hot welt that ran across the whole length of my back. I'm sorry for this, by the way. Hurts worse than the whipping ever did. I'll tell you that for free. And which shows, she's not a complete bastard. She wasn't doing this because she's vicious. She doesn't take pleasure in it.
I was going to mention, because I think it's pretty interesting for me, at least, because they're all scarred up, all the Adem, and she was examining his scars and said, whoever tended to you certainly knew their physic, and this is very clean work, as good as any I've ever seen. And Ko's just like, I'll pass along your compliments. But it's a cool part of the scene, because they're like getting to know each other and everything. But you would think that would be pretty natural, because it's a big part of like their world,
Yeah.
So
we see it too, like when Kvothe gets cut by the
leaf.
Tree, the leaf on the tree, and they stitch him up. Like, they do a really good job on the stitching for him.
Yeah, that made me think. I mean, I guess it's part of their culture. They have medics, whatever.
If you're warriors and you're
I guess
fighting,
you need to be,
you're living a mercenary life, you'd have to kind of be good at stitching things up.
Yeah, that's necessary. That's
closing wounds would be
necessary.
Something you would learn on the fly pretty quickly. So yeah, obviously that's just part and parcel with their life, and so they need good people who can stitch up a wound very well. It would be something that would be very valuable to people in that lifestyle, so it'd be something that they would take note of.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny though. I guess I didn't think it that far. Every single one of them would need this ability.
Yeah.
Right. So that would just be part of their training. It doesn't really get shown. At least not that I remember, that they show it as part of the training. It's most of everything we see is Lithani, a lot of the Lithani, and then just like training, fighting, on all that, and then their stories. So that kind of integrates throughout, but we don't see much else in terms of, I mean, they eat in the cafeteria, but we don't see much in terms of like medical stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, they might not have medical training, but you would think that they would at least have some kind of knowledge about how to clean and stitch wounds, like at least in a basic way, rudimentary way.
Well, and I mean, we at least get it from Tempe, and maybe it does come up more here because it's been a while since I've read this. But they do have quite an emphasis on cleanliness as well.
Yeah.
Right? Being sanitary and everything. It's like a big thing, at least to Tempe for sure. And he even describes it as like that's being civilized.
Yeah.
Not smelling like poop.
I mean, it's excessive. Like to me, like once every 6 months is any more than that, and I think you're just kind of getting a little fancy for your pants.
For your pants.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
just wasting soap.
Sounds like a lot of shit and onions around your joint.
Yeah. Shit and onions. You smell like shit and onions.
Some hefty BO is pretty oniony. I don't want to think about that. Gross.
But yeah, so I mean, she doesn't seem like that. She's not. When you get to know her, she's not a bastard. So she's not vicious. Because when it starts off, it seems like she's like Querette. She's of that same kind of mind. Querette seems vicious. Like she would take pleasure in doing this, and she would think it's hilarious. And we saw her reaction to it. She, it was in his face, mocking him, insulting him directly after it.
Yeah, and going out of her way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being quite vicious about it for sure.
So it's good, like, he gets right off bat that Vashet's not like that. She was testing him, but she wasn't doing it from a place of being malicious. She was testing his resolve, seeing how he would react to it and whether he was worth her time. And then so when he stays, it immediately levels him up a little bit. She's still not, she's not fully trusting him, and she never fully trusts him, but they do gain a good bit of friendship throughout the thing. But she's always kind of got an eye on him. He makes her a little uneasy. But yeah, and then so it was, I hesitated before saying, no offense, Vashet, but you seem different from the other Adem I've met. Not that I've met many, mind you. You're just hungry for familiar body language, she said. And she goes through that there's different schools in the Adem. Hert is just one of the cities. But then they have different schools, and they teach different things, that they focus in on different things. She's like, there is that, I said, but you seem more expressive than other Adem I've seen. I pointed at my face. Vashet shrugged. Where I'm from, we grew up speaking your language, and I spent 4 years as bodyguard and captain for a poet in the small kingdom who also happened to be a king. I probably speak Aturan better than anyone in Hert, including you. So, a couple things. One, the fact that she was a captain of the bodyguard for a poet who's actually a king, with his sword being called the breaking a line, of poetic verse. And this guy, he's Kingkiller. You could easily see where, people would think that the king that he's going to be killed is this mention of a king here, and he's going to go to the small kingdoms, because we know he does go to Junpui. So he does go in that area, and so it could be that he meets this king and kills. That's the king he kills. That's not who I think it is. I think it's lined up perfectly for Roderick. The foreshadowing is extensive for Roderick to be killed, but that is another possibility that he puts in the books right here, and it lines up as well. It's just the foreshadowing for him killing the Calanthus line is so thick that it makes me think that's likely who he's going to kill. Maybe he kills more than one king, though. Maybe he kills off that family line and kills this one as well. So, it's just something to keep an eye on, as moving into book 3, because if there is a king that pops up in the small kingdoms in book 3, it's likely going to be the one Vashet worked for.
I mean, this is huge, right? I mean, this is Kingkiller. This is the title. This
Yeah.
is. But that's interesting. I hadn't considered that. Well, I mean, you could wipe out all kinds of kings for all we know. But yeah, I mean, I guess these are the possibilities. Just the mentioning in itself makes it a possibility, makes it a candidate, right? The
Yeah, I mean, you
Caesura.
would think it's either got to be a king that's mentioned, or it's a character that's already mentioned that we know that's going to become a king.
Hmm.
Because if it's just some completely random person in book 3 that we've not heard anything about in the first 2 books, that seems like that would be a weird choice. Given there's plenty of opportunity to kill people that we've heard of in the first 2 books. You have Simon, Ambrose, the mayor, Roderick, the Poet King. That's just 5 off the top of my head that right there could be kings.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, you ran through those before, and I guess Roderick does seem to be the most likely candidate because it almost feels like a Cinder Braden type situation here, where you have reasons for both, right? The Caesura is an interesting element to bring into the mix, because if it's a break in the line of a bloodline, or what do you call it, a line to be king, a royal line, that in itself is enough, right? But then you bring in the poet because it's the breaking line of a poem. For some people that's enough to make it that much more clean. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or yeah.
Well, I mean, it would fit that sword would be used to kill a poet king. I mean, it would
Mm-hmm.
fit. And so you could easily see it going down that way. But, and you have the fact that he's obviously setting Kvothe up for book 3 to become, he's at least hinting that it's a possibility. He obviously won't go this way because he's going to get into slam jam poetry, but there's that potential that he was going to become a serial killer that hunts poets and tries to rid the world of poetry because of how hardcore he goes against it, and so how much he hates it. And it's kind of like it's also one of those things where he hates it but he really loves it deep down, and so it's like a inside he hates himself type of situations, because
Really
he's always
intense.
speaking in verse.
This would be him breaking into a psychotic
Oh yeah,
level. That would
definitely Breaking Bad in the
that
3rd book if
well
he does that right.
that to me would mean the slam jam poetry is great, and then it becomes massive, and then it completely doesn't work.
It's Well,
There's a
that's going to be
crash
one
and
of the
burn
emotional things.
situation.
Is like Kvothe is ready to become a poet serial killer, and then he hears like Ambrose dropping a verse, and that pulls him back off that ledge. And then he hears Ambrose spitting some rhymes, and then he's like, "Man, if I just put a little beat to that, just start
So
strumming the lute,
this is how he gets
then
on
yeah,
board.
yeah,
So he shifts from being a poet serial killer to being a massive supporter of poetry, or the way he can make poetry work for him is turn it into song.
yeah." Well, he hears Ambrose, and Ambrose is like, "It's all about that bass, no treble." And then Kavoth's like, "Yeah, let me put a little bass to that."
Oh
He's like, "That is just such a brilliant line, and if I just put some bass to that, then we got a real slam jam poetry session going." And then boom, it takes off from there.
What's his line? What a northern thrush? Something ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It
was really good. It was really good poetry.
So bad.
So say the Thumble. I can't remember what it was. Something like that. Starts off like that. So say something north.
Yeah, he really cuts him to pieces on that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like a poetry battle. It's like this, well, like Slam Jam. There you go, Slam Jam poetry. So they're battling. It's like 8 Mile, but with poems.
Yeah.
and in purple plumed hats and tights up on stage.
That's basically the Aeolian. Is like, people are sitting there watching them go rhyming back and forth, rap battling.
They're just in the background, and that's their participation. And then
Ambrose like flips it on him and earns Kavoth's respects because he spins it on him, and he does the entire verse to Jackass. And he's like, "Now you can't use it against me." Yeah.
Yeah, Kvothe's just like, oh, okay.
Pulls the Eminem on him.
He earns Kvothe's respect. And then, then they join up and become the duo.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how that goes. But, and then so he asks Vashet, "You didn't grow up here?" She shook her head. "I'm from Thane, a town farther north. We're more cosmopolitan. Hair has the one school, and everyone is tied very tightly to it. The sword tree is one of the old paths too, rather formal. I grew up following the path of joy." So you got these different schools, these different paths, and the different personalities of the different little cities or towns.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so theirs is more cosmopolitan, but the fact that Hert is old school and it follows one of the old paths and it's formal also, I think, lends towards the fact that I was talking about, like with the sleeping mind, and they're in a wild area, in a wild spot where seeing the name of the wind is easier, and those kind of things where they're tapping into that kind of sleeping mind thing. I think that's also lends towards that idea that the fact that Hart is more old school than cities a little bit further north that are more cosmopolitan and becoming more
integrated into society,
integrated to the rest of the world. And so
this is more in tune with the old stories, and what we're about to find out, and then
the old powers too, and that kind of stuff. They're the best ones with the sword, and those kind of things where it's like, I think there's something to it, that the fact that they got the sword tree and the wind and the wildness, and Kvothe seeing the name of the wind, they're taking Shayin taking the perfect step, Kvothe taking the perfect step when he sees the name of the wind. I think there's something to that.
That's an interesting thing to consider, because from what they mention here, it sounds like there's 36 branches. There's like 36 different schools.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of like this is old and formal and they stick to the code and all that type of stuff, I mean, that kind of suggests that some of these other schools, they water it down, right? And if you water it down, the step wouldn't, I mean, it kind of lends to the idea that the step wouldn't be as perfect, right? That the fighting might not be as crisp, or what have you, whatever adjectives you want to use. It's that idea of it being watered down because they stick to the code more tightly, right? And it's more formal and it's older, it's closer to the stories. To me, that lends more strength to it. I mean, we don't get a lot of evidence that these other schools aren't as good. That's not what's being said here, right?
Well, she does. She specifically says that this is the best place to go to learn the sword.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, she's saying that, that's why she came here, because of the reputation.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so she grew up with the Path of Joy. Is that what it was?
Yeah, she went Path of Joy, and she's like, there's other schools. This is one of the many schools that follows the Latantha, the Path of the Sword Tree. It's one of the oldest, behind the 8th and Eratan. There are other paths, maybe 3 dozen, but some of those are very small, with only 1 or 2 schools teaching their Gaitan. Is that why your sword is different? Did you bring it from your other school? Vashet gave me a narrow look. What do you mean? What do you know of my sword? And he points out that she had used it when she was trimming the willow switch, and she's like, you're certainly paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she's like, strictly speaking, it's not my sword. It's merely in my keeping. It's an old sword, and the blade is the oldest part of it. It was given to me by Shayin herself. So she's talking about, like, this isn't the oldest school, but it's one of the oldest schools. But they're using swords that date all the way back, predate the Battle of Drazentor. So, and she's talking about 8th is a school that's older than them, and Eratan. That would be, it could be the case that they've got their swords after all this shit, and like these are swords that have like came back into their possession or something like that. Or it could mean that like the story of 8th and Wraith, like the 99 stories, predates the block of Drazentor, goes all the way back to the Ruach time, before the war, before the creation war.
So that also, it seems like the way the stories work in this world, that would also lend much greater strength, right? If it's that, it goes that far back, Because it seems to be a big part of the themes in the book, is that the more in tap with the stories you are, or a group is, the more strength they're able to gain from it. I don't know. So it seems to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea that they can trace the lineage of these swords all the way back to the beginning, to the first owner, is significant, because how would
Astounding.
they do that if they had lost chain of custody of the swords at some point? So it seems like this has been a pretty straight line for this school. They've been around for at least predating the, I think that's the more likely scenario than something like, they discovered these swords, somewhere along the line. They found the swords and they just, there's a book that listed who owned the swords before that or something along those lines. So it seems like these are swords that they've had in their possession for over 5,000 years. And this school has been around for over 5,000 years. And then if 8th predates that, you got the story of the 99 stories predates their school. That means we're talking about that the Adem are coming all the way from the Ruach, and that the 99 stories is a story of during the time of the Ruach, not a time of man and fae.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot going on in this area, where they are, why they've been here as long as they've been, right?
Yeah, there's something significant going on, because just the fact that their swords predate the creation war is significant in its own right, because of the fact that they know who's owned the swords that whole time. That shows that it's been, in their possession likely the whole time. So if you're dating the Adem all the way back to pre-creation war, then it's also lending credence to the Ademaru being a branch of the Ruach. And so you got the Ruach, the Adem, the Adema, like their names all kind of tie in with each other. And I think this is given a lot of evidence towards the fact that these are people that started from 5,000 plus years ago, before man and before fae. And the Ademaru and the Adem have been around for thousands of years. And they were, involved in that group of the most powerful people that there were. And I think they're likely, when they talk about, like, some of the people became angels, some of the people became Amir, and then there's the third batch of Ruach that didn't join either group and they went their own way. I think that third batch, that's where you get the current Adem, the current Ademaru, Tinkers, that kind of stuff, Florian. I think that's where you get, those Ruach went out and went their own way, and some went to the Fae, some went to, stayed in the mortal world, became mortals. And I think, likely the thing that has changed them from man to Fae is something to do with the moon. And now that it's not in one place, it goes from place to place. I think the shifting of the moon and the environments that they live in changed them to man and to Fae.
It seems like the creation war sent huge ripples through the world, right? Like that's when there was a big shift.
Yeah, that's the linchpin of the whole story, as far as Haliax and the Amir and all that. I mean, the story that Kvothe is chasing, it's the center of it is the creation war.
Yeah. But
it's not like the Adem talk about fighting in the creation war. When she tells the stories, she tells it, like that they're not, they're not like that's not the center part of their story. Like we fought against the Seven, or there's no story. She doesn't tell the story like that. Like we're on one side and the other people are on the other. She just tells the story of what they did, and kind of sounds like, she doesn't put them in the story themselves. So I think it's likely that they were just more, rather than being someone like a Scarpy or a Haliax or Lanre and Lyra, like I think that they were likely maybe soldiers in the war, but they weren't out there trying to fight this war. I don't think this was the Adem war, and I think that's likely why when you have Ruach that didn't join the Angels or the Amir, it's probably because this wasn't their war. They might have been fighting in it and lost people and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't seem like this is their passion in life, is to right the wrongs of this war.
It's really interesting that he mentions, and I guess it makes sense, but he mentions the handle is worn, but the blade looks new, because she says basically the opposite.
Yeah.
The blade is the oldest part of it. I love the idea it's merely in her keeping, and we find that out and we learn the story behind that. But yeah, it's a really cool tradition that they have. I mean, talk about like elevating your position, right? Or having a reason to respect and have respect for your position within their world is like you inherit a sword that's been used by warriors for thousands of years. It's pretty wild, man.
Yeah.
And then everything that goes along with it, all that memorization and how important all that has to be understood and respected for the lineage of the sword in itself. Yeah, it's cool, man. It's really cool mythology to like throw into the world, to build it out.
Yeah, and I mean when you tie in, the little pieces of information you get, it shows, that this is one of the ancient races, that's been around a lot longer than, the mayor and his family. And so
Well,
those kind of things, it's like they definitely seem to predate that, and they have the fact that they can trace their swords all the way back. They have all these stories, the 99 stories. They know about the Chandrian. They have stories about them. They know their true names. They've likely got access to information that is just you're not going to find in most parts of the world. This is one of those kind of special places where these are an old race of people that have been around a long time from the beginning. They have access to information that he couldn't find anywhere else. If he had stayed longer and trained with them, he could have perhaps, became, more established in their community. Probably would have gained a lot of valuable information about the history of the world there.
I was going to say it's one thing to have this old like lineage and all these different bloodlines throughout and that go back so far, but to also be so in tune with like their history as they are is really interesting. I can have all this respect for it and how it's a big part of their world in itself. Like they're carrying on that past moving forward. It's a really cool way to distinct them from others, from other races in the world. It's great. I mean, it builds out the world in such a big way as well. It's one thing to have this other location and other types of language, but to go even further and to build like the history of the world that's completely separate from like the Chandri and the Haliax. And they still talk about it, and it's a huge part of it, but the Eighth and Wraith thing is like completely separate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they're very different. They have access to information that you can't find. I mean they're extremely unique, and you just wish he would have stayed longer and dug for more nuggets of information, because obviously they have a rich, long past, and they seem to know it pretty well. But they keep it pretty secret. They're not spreading this information around the world.
Well, yeah, that's another part of it that's really interesting, and we kind of get that within Kvothe being there. It's like he's hearing these stories for the first time. We haven't even heard snippets from other things, and he's one of those guys that he's getting stories. I don't think he didn't hear this from his father, and his father knows all kinds of stories, right? So I am interested to see what old Cobb would do to the Eighth and Wraith story. How some of those individual things would change.
Well, Eighth and Wraith are named Eight and Bathy, and they got mad because old Eight ate one of Bathy's apples, and a demon popped out of it, and that demon ate one of Eight's babies. So it gets real serious real quick.
Wow.
And so he shot a lightning arrow through the heart of old Eight. He got shot through
through Bathy.
Yeah, Bathy. Yeah, it's a very confusing story. It doesn't make a lot of sense. He doesn't do a good job with it.
Well, he does it like we were talking on one of the past episodes. Like that remix is typically not as good as the original.
Remix.
Oh, that's what
that would make his story so much better. Like if Jake was doing that as he's like telling the story, he's just sitting there going remix.
He's in the back, and
or Kvothe does it. Kvothe every time old cop starts telling a story about Kvothe and he's mixing it all up, Kvothe comes out of the kitchen being like remix. And they're like, why do you always do that when I tell Kvothe stories?
I love it. Like, he just comes out and he's like, DJ Cobb.
Yeah.
I love the idea that an old Cobb every time just turns like pissed off. Like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you interrupting my story? It's like, no, I'm adding color to it. Yeah. Just as you are.
Yeah.
Or you're completely butchering all of it and acting like you know everything. It's great.
But yeah.
Remix.
And then, so, yeah, she mentions, I came here because while the Latanta might be rather formal, they excel in the use of the sword. I learned as much as I could from the Path of Joy. 3 other schools refused me before Shane brought me in. She's a clever woman and realized there was something to be gained in teaching me. And then I love we get her little swagger here where he's like, it must have been hard, I said, coming here and being the stranger to everyone. She shrugs and, making her sword rise and fall on her shoulders. At first, she admitted, but they recognize talent, and I have that to spare. Among those who study the Path of Joy, I was viewed as rather stiff and stodgy, but here I am seen as somewhat wild. But I love that, at first, but they recognize talent. And, I'm fucking oozing talent.
Well, it's also kind of funny where she's like, 3 different schools turned her away, and then Shane brought her in because, she saw the talent within me and how great I am. It's like, well, maybe you suck. Maybe she's not a great judge. Yeah, I'm taking your word for it. Maybe at these other schools you just didn't cut the mustard. But here, you're good enough. Bring her on in. Her old crooked nose face.
Yeah, she seems pretty fucking badass.
Yeah, I agree.
I know.
I'm doing that thing that people do.
Joking?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Didn't realize that's what I did. I didn't get it.
And then he's like, does the Path of Joy also teach the Lothani? And she laughs and she's like, that's a matter of some considerable debate. The simple answer is yes. All Adem study the Lothani to some degree, those in the schools especially. That said, the Lothani is open to a broad interpretation. What some schools cling to, others spurn. So that's why I say there's a lot of religious aspects to the Lothani, where like it even segregates into different schools of thought.
Yeah.
Different you got it branching out, and yeah.
I mean, it's very, very similar. Where it's and like you would expect, people who believe one way, they believe 100% this is the way, and everybody else is a fool. I mean, they're not necessarily saying that here, but you would imagine it's got to be that way because that's just the way people are, man. Not everybody's like that. Other people will be more accepting, but they have their own flavor and what they prefer, So
yeah.
people prefer or choose a certain path that tends to work best for them. I like it. Yeah. I mean, her approach was like, it was really just practical because she's like, yeah, I got everything out of the Path of Joy. They're great with sword and, I dig the sword. So I came in and now I get to wield it.
That's why, like, Celine, she talks about how she's going to go to all the schools and learn all the Ketans. And she's, she was talking about, like, Vashet's got a secret Ketan. She doesn't tell anybody or something along those lines. I can't remember. Someone's got their own Ketan. But I like that little aspect of her. She's just like, I'm going to learn everybody's moves. I'm going to incorporate it, and I'm going to make a new thing, and I'm going to be the baddest fighter on the planet.
I like that. She's also very young, right?
Yeah.
So that also would make sense for someone that's younger, would think bigger picture in that sense. Like, oh, I'm going to do something nobody's done. I'm going to do all the schools. I'm fucking Bruce Lee this shit, basically. Combine them all and make my own thing.
And then we get, she gave me a thoughtful look. Is it true that you said the Lothani comes from the same place as laughing? I nodded. That is a good answer, she said. My teacher in the Path of Joy once said the very thing to me. Vashet frowned. You look pensive when I say that. Why? And so he tells her about spinning leaf. And he's like, I'm glad you like my answer, but honestly, I don't know what it means. I didn't ask what it means, she said easily. It's just a nonsense answer, I said. I know you all place great stock in the Lithani, but I don't really understand it. I've just found a way to fake it. And I like this. She's like, there's no pretending. Like, you can't fake it. You're either, it's like swimming. It's obvious whether you can do it or not.
Yeah, so that's a really good visual metaphor that works really well.
But, he throws the logic back in her face with, so you could stand on the bottom of the lake and pretend to be swimming, just moving your arms. And so when she asks him how he faked it, he explains spinning leaf to her and how he tips his thoughts into a light, empty, floating place where the answers to their questions came easily. And I love her response. So you've stolen the answers from yourself. You have clearly fooled us by pulling the answers from your own mind.
Yeah, it's a great way to build out the Lithani even more, because where it would also make sense for Kvothe's character, where he'd be like irritated, like, well, this is bullshit. I'm not really doing anything. It's like, yeah, but you are. You just fucking realize it's like, I remember. Well, I don't know if it's a great analogy, but I remember one of the first times somebody that I've known for a very, very, very long time never smoked weed. And then he did. And he was super ripped. Didn't think he was high at all. Because he thought it was going to be like some crazy shit. He thought he was going to be like LSD or something. It's like, no, dude, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I love like saying that you're not high. It's like, I'm looking in your eyes. You are definitely high. You were super stoned. You just thought you were gonna be jumping off of fucking buildings and shit. It's not crazy, dude.
Well,
it's very mellow.
When you have your like first experience with alcohol, like, and you go from sober to drunk for the first time, that's super noticeable.
Yeah.
Where you're like, whoa, this is way different. This is a way different feeling.
Yeah, no, that's another good example, because the first time I did get stoned, I was like, I don't know if I am.
Yeah,
I remember looking.
That's a lot of people.
I remember looking through, like, trying to look at the edges of my vision, and I'm like, I think I'm looking for like all these signs, and I was just like, man, I don't know what this is. And then eventually you kind of start cracking up at shit that's like not nearly as funny as you're thinking it is in that moment. It's like, oh, okay. Now
once you recognize the feeling, you notice it every time. But yeah, it's it's not like most people start with alcohol, and so that is extremely noticeable. You very much know that when you've gone from sober to drunk, especially when your tolerance is extremely low, where like you could take like a shot or two and you're gonna feel it. Like that's a completely new experience. So that stands out, and it's not the same thing in the other way.
It does definitely make sense though for Kvothe, like I was saying, because of the fact that he's always like, he's very formulaic. He needs to know exactly what the objective is and know that he's moving towards it. Yeah. If it's more open for interpretation, that really bothers him.
Yeah. Well, he wants to define everything and pin it down. And be able to explain it. And so not everything can be explained, and they constantly try to get that across.
It's the best example of something that can't be explained.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And or the naming
or music. Mind. Well, remember the example of music or love in this sense, like when it's like, oh yeah, absolutely you can. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, exactly. And he just gets all frustrated and flummoxed.
Yeah, and he goes, you don't understand. I said, growing irritated. I don't have the slightest idea what the Lithani really is. It's not a path, but it helps choose a path. It's the simplest way, but it's not easy to see. Honestly, you people sound like drunk cartographers. Vashet laughs, and then she's like, there are many drunks who are quite conversant with the Lithani, she said. Several legendarily so. And every time she says that, I immediately think of the Jackie Chan movie, the Drunken Master, whatever, Drunken Master. I immediately think of that. But yeah, and she's like, seeing I was still agitated, she made a motion to call me. I don't understand the Lithani either, not in a way that can be explained to another. The teaching of the Lithani is an art I do not possess. If Tempe has managed to instill the Lithani in you, it is a great mark in his favor. And then she's like, part of the problem's in your language. Your language is very explicit, and precise, and direct. Our language is rich with implication. so it's easier for us to accept the existence of things that cannot be explained. The Lithani is the greatest of these. And so when he's like, can you give me an example and don't say blue?
There's a couple little payoffs. We got a Loden mentions, which
twice in this chapter.
Yeah. Don't say blue, or I might go absolutely mad right here on this bench. It's so great, man. These are great and think about that too. I mean, well, obviously we have cognition of this, but the fact that like first read through, these are payoffs, right? Yeah. That he was able to layer in, which you're going to get. Like, you're not going to forget blue, blue, blue. That's going to definitely jump. And you're not going to forget he fell off a fucking roof either, you know?
Yeah, and the example she chose is a good one. I think the way she's able to kind of explain it, I think fits very well. It makes it easier to kind of comprehend. Obviously, it's not easy to comprehend what they mean by the Lithani. It's a very abstract concept, but it's similar to, and when you talk about it in the vein of love or music or those kind of things, where it's like, what is music? What is love? And it's like, well, you know it when you see it, but how do you pin it down and give it, a exact definition? Any definition, anytime you try to pin it down, you show tons of holes in every kind of definition you give. There's ways to poke holes in it. And so that's why she's like, love is such a thing. You have knowledge of what it is, but it defies careful explication. And he's like, love is a subtle concept, I admitted. It's elusive, like justice, but it can be defined. And she's like, do so then, my clever student. Tell me of love. And he starts thinking. She's like, you see how easy it will be for me to poke holes in any definition you give. He's like, love is the willingness to do anything for someone, even at detriment to yourself. In that case, how is love different from duty or loyalty? It is also combined with a physical attraction, even a mother's love. Combined with an extreme fondness, then, I admitted. And what exactly do you mean by fondness? She asked with a maddening calm. It is, I trailed off, racking my brain to think of how I could describe love without resorting to other equally abstract terms. She's like, this is the nature of love. To attempt to describe it will drive a woman mad. That is what keeps poets scribbling endlessly away. If one could pen it to paper all complete, the others would lay down their pens, but it cannot be done. Which I think that's the good example of it, is that you have all these people that kind of, you talk around it. You write these poems that are extravagant, they express the emotion of love, but they're not defining love, they're expressing it.
Well, and some great examples, like when you see a mother with her child, you see love, and you can see that, but you're not experiencing what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
You can see, I remember watching a movie once where they had an observation of, it was like a guy who was watching his wife with a man she's cheating with. And that why it was so upsetting for him is not that she's meeting with this dude, it's that he sees them across the street in the apartment, and he could see from afar, like, these are two people that are in love with each other. Like, they were comfortable with each other, enjoyed each other's company, that sort of thing. So it's like, you can see it, but you still can't, you can't define it. You're also
What if it was like a Jaime Lannister, Cersei type of thing going on? It's really, really gross and uncomfortable.
Well, for them, it's not.
Yeah, for them, it's love.
Well, so, and then when you feel it,
see, but like when you show me them, I don't think love. I think gross, but that is their, in their mind, that is love. That's why it's a very difficult concept. What I think is disgusting, gross, is something that is love to them.
Well, so, and what's interesting about that also is, like, that's why and how they connect this. The description she gives, I mean, they end up sounding cliche, right? Because that's all you can do, right? Is offer cliched examples that can point at and sort of get towards what it is. But again, you can't really wrap your mind around it, or that's why all the great stories involve these types of things that you can't,
but it's also
that we can
why
sort of get towards, like, and shoot at.
It's kind of hard to understand love without experiencing it too.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, like, if you talk to a young person about love, you get ridiculous, responses, or you get they sound like Brick talking about "I love lamp." And,
well, then especially talk to someone who just had like their first love and it didn't work out. It ended badly. That person now thinks love is non-existent. It's bullshit. It's nothing but pain. I remember that experience where you're like, no, none of this shit's real. It's all total bullshit. Like, it's really interesting that metamorphosis.
And it's hard for younger people to distinguish between infatuation and love.
Yeah.
And it's hard for anybody really. I mean, because it's a thin line between the two. But infatuation is much more fleeting. And
a big part of it
pretty quickly.
A big part of it, comes with maturity and understanding and experience as you start to realize the differences.
Yeah.
Then they become quite clear. But yeah, at a young age, at a certain young age, there's zero difference, right? Like all you think everything is,
Yeah. It's just that you're not used to those strong emotions, especially because, you go from you don't really have them. You have, some feelings, but once you hit like puberty, where all of a sudden fucking shit goes blown out the doors.
Yeah. The waves come crashing in. It's fucking nuts.
It's a completely different change. So you're not used to those feelings. So which kind of I think is fitting in the example of Kvothe trying to learn the Lethani. He's a kid trying to understand love who's never experienced it. And then, Cheyenne, they can look at him and see whether he's experiencing it. So when she uses the example, like the purpose of the questions is, you asking them is like a young girl asking a young girl about the boy she fancies. Her answers may not use the word, but they reveal love or the lack of it within her heart. And so I think that's a good example of why, they ask the questions and gives a reasonable explanation of what they're getting out of the experience, even if like we as the reader can't understand the Lethani because it's not understandable for us, or along those lines because it's Rothfuss making it up. But the understanding it and might not be possible for us to fully understand it, and it might not be possible to explain it. But people like Cheyenne, you can see a world where they understand it, they've experienced it, they know it, and they can see through your answers whether you are within the Lethani or not, if the Lethani is guiding you or not.
Well,
based on the answers you give.
Think about the best way for us as readers for it to be revealed to us to some degree would be the question and answer sessions to begin with. Mm-hmm. It's a whole bunch of different people with different perspectives giving their answers to questions, right? Saying that it comes like that idea of it comes from where laughing comes from. That gives us something to grasp towards. We that's what's so great about it too, is we know when Kvothe's doing well. Now we also get that the room feels different, and that might have been a good one, that might have been absurd. But he doesn't know, and it's a tremendous counterbalance. I mean, the way he writes the experience in the Adem is so tremendously great, because Kvothe, it's shit like this, man, where he's frustrated because he doesn't understand. And he doesn't understand a lot of things, but he's going into it, and he's actually getting some pats on the back, and that's even frustrating him because he's like, but I don't fucking get this, man.
Well, and Kvothe standing in as a proxy for us, because when we're hearing about this stuff, it doesn't, we don't understand it. But
that's why it's such
then like when
writing,
with the way he explains it, it makes it where you can, even if you don't understand the Lethani, you can understand what they're getting out of it and what the experience is for them and why the tests work and those kind of things. Because I can look back and I can just go from the story, like when Kvothe's like, I'm not, in love with Denna. It's like, no, yeah, you are. Like, I know you are. I see you are. Even if you don't understand it or you're in denial about it, whatever, I can see it that you are.
The signs
and so,
are
like,
all there,
even though
bro.
Kvothe is like, I don't understand the Lethani. I don't, if you say like I'm good at, I have a good grasp of the Lethani. He's like, I don't agree with you because I don't understand it. But Cheyenne can see what he's saying, and just like we can process what we're seeing on the page and see that he's in love. she could process what he's saying and see that, he is at least some part of him understands the Lethani, even if he doesn't fully grasp it himself.
Well, and
outwardly.
And Vashet even went as far as saying, this speaks well of Tempe, if Tempe saw it in you, right? So Tempe saw it in him through his discussions with him and whatever other ways that you can see it.
Or was able to impart it on him is what she says, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when he comes in with answers that blow their doors off, well, apparently he's, a bit of a savant with this shit.
Yeah, and I think it's, that spinning leaf giving an access to the sleeping mind. I think, because of how in tune they are with this kind of inexplainable phenomenon that's similar to the sleeping mind, I think that's, with the Lethani, the way they're kind of tapping into that is with their sleeping mind. And that's, I think, part of the reason you can't explain it. And so, because even Elodin, when he talks about the sleeping mind, he's talking about like love and those kind of concepts. And that's where he's saying like the sleeping mind is coming from those kind of things. Where it's, and so I think the Lethani, it's the same type of thing. These are all in the field of the sleeping mind, whatever that concept is. I think that's kind of where all this stuff lies.
That's kind of in the same vein of stop grabbing at my tits. It's like, it's here, just let go. Stop trying so hard. Yeah. It's like, it kind of drives at the same thing where you're getting it. What I thought was actually really interesting, and I could be just trying to pull straws out of something, but when he goes on to say, how can my answers reveal a knowledge of Lethani when I don't truly know what it is? You obviously understand the Lethani, she said. It is rooted deep inside you, too deep for you to see. Sometimes it is the same with love. And for whatever reason, what popped in my mind at that point was this choosing to forget, putting things deep, deep, deep down, like forgetting that he had love with his parents. And he knows he had it, he experienced it, but he doesn't revisit that shit. You know what I mean? So she's not necessarily saying that, but for me, when I read that section, it's like that is kind of what he's doing to himself, right? Because he's shut all those memories down to such a degree that he doesn't revisit them. He doesn't think about his mother singing to him and all of those types of things. At least we don't read about it. Doesn't talk about it, so it doesn't get reiterated. Early on, we got a lot of it, right? And that was a big, big part of who he was. And we heard about his father so much. And then that kind of all just kind of goes away after, everything that happens. We revisit it seldomly, but when he goes deep into it, you see how broken he is.
Yeah.
So as a self-defense mechanism, it's like, again, the doors, right? Those doors of forgetting. It's like that could be having a real effect on him where it is limiting his ability to go full on into understanding something like the Lethani or loving Denna, allowing himself, right, to be in a relationship because he's freaking broken and he doesn't think he's worthy and all that other stuff we've talked about.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it could have some kind of impact on him, but it's also, as far as it could have an impact on him as far as like, because he is emotionally closed off, that's closing off part of his sleeping mind or something along those lines. But yeah, because like I see like the sleeping mind, that when she's describing that's very much like the sleeping mind being described. Like when he called the name of the wind, like some part of his mind, or when he translates the name fire, when Elxadal says the true name and he hears the word fire, like some part of his sleeping mind accessed the information and translated it for him. Or like when he called the name of the wind, the sleeping mind kind of took over and did it, even though he can't, when he's not in that moment, he doesn't understand it. He can't pull back to that information and access how he did it and what it was like. It's like that memory's just gone. But that seems to be like what she's describing here when she's talking about like some part of you deep down understands the Lethani. You just don't, your conscious mind just doesn't understand it.
Yeah, you called the wind in anger.
Yeah.
Right,
your conscious mind doesn't understand how you called the wind, but your sleeping mind does. Your conscious mind doesn't understand the Lethani, but your sleeping mind does. And that's why when you're in spinning leaf, and you got that window open
Mm.
to your sleeping mind, that's why you're able to pull those answers, because it's not coming from your conscious mind, it's coming from your
So
sleeping mind.
that's an interesting thing to consider. So without Ben, without the Heart of Stone, without those things, without his Alar, would he call the wind at some point in his life? Like, was he destined to?
I think, yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if that training, starts to open those doors up for you, or if it's just something that's naturally part of you. Because I do think like his lineage traces back to some of the most powerful people. I think he's probably destined to figure this stuff out.
It's an interesting thought experiment in the sense that you have muscle memory, right? Like you have you end up with muscle memory for certain types of things. When you're talking about the mind, right, and like the Catan for the mind was Spinning a Leaf, right, with his Heart of Stone and things of that nature. You do exercise your mind to a degree to where it opens you up to other possibilities. With those possibilities, then having experiences which are intense, it could access something that he could not have been could have been capable of without having gone through those exercises. I don't know.
Like the Heart of Stone, I think is kind of the antithesis of the sleeping mind.
I guess what I should be saying is
cutting off emotion, but the Alar,
Alar
specifically is like believing things that aren't true, like believing, forcing your mind to believe something that isn't real and believe in it deep down so that it becomes real and you make it real and you manifest it. And I think that's more in line with like the training your mind to believe in the impossible. I think would be something that you could see as starting to give yourself access to the sleeping mind, starting to open up those doors to those possibilities. So I could see where like training in the Alar might have some ripple effects where you're more likely to gain powers of naming if you start off with learning sympathy and those kind of things.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
But on the flip side of that, though, like Elodin doesn't. On the flip side of that, Elodin doesn't, make that a big point. Like, go practice your sympathy and go practice your LR, and da da da. I can't remember. Maybe there's a time where he makes him maintain his LR or something like that, and a strict focus. I can't remember when he starts taking Elodin seriously. If Elodin has him do that. Like, but he has him like start like blindfolding himself, walking around where he can't see and that kind of stuff. But I can't remember if he does anything specifically with the ALAR, but that's something I'll pay attention to when we get back to the university and Kvothe kind of takes his training more seriously. It'll be interesting to see if Elodin is pointing to like the ALAR as something important to kind of strengthen.
Yeah, that's a good point though, because you're right. Leading into where we are now, it's been all about sleeping mind, and opening the doors up to this like not trying to control and just perceiving things differently. Yeah, rather than exercising, like, because that's all Oxidol stuff, right? That's all yeah.
But then Vashet goes, either way, it is not cheating. It's a way of revealing that which is hidden in the deep waters of your mind. The fact that you found it on your own is quite remarkable. I nodded to her. I bow to your wisdom, Vashet. You bow to the fact that I am unarguably correct. I love her. Like, I love the cocky characters. I know, like, you get in, especially there's a lot of people that are very into fantasy that I grew up socially awkward, and so there's a lot of animosity between socially awkward people and very confident people. I think for whatever reason,
jealousy,
they butt heads. Well, I mean, it goes in both directions, where you see a lot of socially awkward people have some animosity towards confident people, and confident people pick on socially awkward people for some reason. I don't really get the dynamic. I was never mean to people that are socially awkward or those, and I've been in those situations where like I'm not good in a big crowd, like a big party scene. I hate those environments. I'm kind of a introvert, so I don't like the massive crowds. I can do perfectly fine in small settings, but I'll get uncomfortable in large settings. So I can relate to people who are very socially awkward, but also have a ton of confidence, and so I can't relate to not having confidence. I've always had it, but the but for whatever reason, there's some animosity between those people. So I'm curious on Vashet, because Kvothe gets a lot of shit. I don't see Vashet get as much, but she is just as arrogant as Kvothe is. I mean, she's in some ways more so, but she is very, 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 very confident, very sure of herself. And I love that quality of her. It endears me to her. There's not enough extremely confident. There's also a tendency in fantasy books where extremely confident people are like pricks. They're assholes.
Yeah.
Like, they're like either villains or they're just, arrogant assholes. And there's not a lot of Kvothe where it's like a very confident, arrogant guy that's also a great dude. So you get him occasionally, and I like him. Like Adolin's another one. He's very, very confident in himself, and he's a really good character.
Yeah, it's almost
Stormlight Archive.
What you're describing is almost like a trope.
Yeah,
right. It's so often. Yeah, that's an interesting. Well, and you're right about her too. Yeah, when you read her, you're like, she does definitely have a lot of confidence, borderline on arrogant, if not completely arrogant. But she knows her shit. She believes that she knows her shit, and they do well
and
together.
She's funny. Man. She's funny. It makes it funny. Like there's the whole section with the Adem. There's a ton of funny moments with the Adem. The Adem are one of the funniest people. Just on like the man mothers and the music and all the different things. Like unintentionally funny and just the awkward different social situations are funny, and so there's a ton of funniness. But yeah, I love her confidence.
I like how he describes learning from her. So it was so easy, it felt dishonest. It was like all this time of trying to communicate with Tempe. Now he has someone that speaks better Atoran than he does, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, you would imagine he's been practicing, and doing, to a grueling degree, given how difficult it is. And now he's got an inside track.
Yeah, sometimes you think like just immersing yourself in a language, like going and living in a place where they don't speak your language is the best way to learn a foreign language, is what people say. This would be interesting because of how little similarity there is as far as like their culture is completely different, but also the hand talk. It's like how would you it would take you so long to be able to pick up that this means smile and this means this and this and this and this, because it's not in a spoken language. And so, man, it seems like it would be extremely difficult to pick up the Adem hand talk without any kind of commonality in language.
Yeah, I think a big part of like the idea of immersing yourself is you pick up nonverbal gestures along with the way a word is stated and the context of when it's stated. And then you just sort of try to eventually put it together. But with hand talk, I mean, it's how would you?
Yeah, the problem would be is like if you don't speak the same language, how would you go ask them? Like, how do you smile? Like you smile, but like, how would you even pick up that that's what they're doing with their hands? Like, how would you wouldn't even know what the hell they're doing with their hands.
Yeah, the fact that they're not using their face. Yeah, that would be.
So if you can't ask that question, it would be like, how would you pick up on this?
You'd be lost.
It would just seems like it would be extremely difficult to try to learn the hand talk without having some ability to speak the language.
Well, yeah.
But, and it also gives a great line where she's like, on the other hand, Vashet made it clear that my hand language was embarrassingly crude. I could get my point across, but what I was doing was, at best, baby talk. At worst, it resembled the rantings of a deranged maniac. She's like, right now you speak like this. She got to her feet, waved both hands over her head, and pointed to herself with both thumbs. I want to make good fight. She gave a wide, insipid grin. With sword. She thumped her chest with both fists, then jumped into the air like an excited child. It's like, come now. I'm not that bad. You were close, Vashet said seriously as she sat back down on the bench. If you were my son, I would not let you leave the house. She's like, as my student, it is only tolerable because you are a barbarian. It's as if Tempe brought home a dog that can whistle. The fact that you are out of tune stands quite beside the point.
Yeah, her antics.
They slam his culture and his people so often with this, like, you're like a dog, you're like a simpleton, idiot, stupid person. They're just constantly throwing it. It's not your fault. I mean, it's just, that's the way you are. You guys are just stupid idiot people.
Well, I like they continuously tell him that, but then she goes as far as like, here, this is what it looks like. And she's like, does this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man. Jeez. Laying on pretty thick here.
Yeah, that shit's hilarious, though. The way she does it.
It is hilarious.
I love that fucking... That's a funny shit talking. But yeah, and she tells him, he speaks too much and you speak too loudly. The heart of Adem is stillness and silence. Our language reflects this. It's like, second, you must be much more careful with your gestures, with their placement and timing. They modify specific words and thoughts. Sometimes they run purposely counter to your surface meaning, which we saw with Tempe. So he has seen that where Tempe is signing things to give the signal to Kvothe to take him seriously, even though the words he's using are running counter to what he's saying, what he's expressing to him. When he's like telling him, be mindful, like he's trying to warn him about the bandits in the woods, but he's trying not to give it away with his words. He's trying to warn Kvothe with his hand talk. When they were walking to that bar and they heard it ended up being a deer, but they thought it was bandits. But his hand talk was warning Kvothe while his words were talking about like, just mundane stuff about like fruit or something.
I like the you say too much and are too loud. That even sounded like we were talking earlier. It's like a drunken teenager.
Yeah.
Just overly excited.
And so, and you also get, the hand talk is extremely subtle. And he's like, you must also come to understand the fine shades of meaning, the difference between slim and cinder, as my poet king used to say. Right now, you only have one smile. That cannot help but make a person look a fool. And then they worked for several hours, and Vashet made it clear something Tempe could only hint at. A turn was like a wide, shallow pool. It had many words, all very specific and precise. A demic was like a deep well. There were fewer words, but they each had many meanings. A well-spoken sentence in a turn is a straight line pointing. A well-spoken sentence in Adem is like a spider web, each strand with a meaning of its own, a piece of something greater, more complex. Which is that's some Rothfuss shit in multiple ways. It's a really cool way to describe it, and it's also how he writes his book, where it's much more implication than explicit information. Like if you're reading Rothfuss' book, for him to give you answers, probably reading the wrong book. He's going to give you some answers, and there's going to be some explanations, but a lot of the stuff is just implicit information that it's up to you to kind of interpret it and analyze it and figure it out on your own and come up with your own answers.
It's very rarely explicit.
Yeah.
And what's so great about that visual description is that's very much our language, is straight line pointing. Spiderweb sort of strand with everything having its own meaning and then coming together. That's like a poem, right? So it's also, this again is leaning towards poetry. So this is inevitability for Kvothe. He's going to be ensconced in poets.
Yeah. I mean, he's all about poetry, even though he says he's not. So yeah, he's going to go down that path of potentially starting to become a serial killer, and then Ambrose pulls him back.
He's going to be wearing nothing but black turtlenecks and what I was going to say duvet. What's the fucking hat?
The beret.
Yeah, beret. Yeah, beret. Smoking cigs, but like smoking long cigs. Like not busting them like gray.
Sunglasses, black sunglasses. He wears his sunglasses at night.
Yeah, there you go. And a lot of snapping.
But yeah, and then he goes into the dining hall for supper, but this time, instead of like keeping his head down and kind of ignoring everybody, he starts watching and studying them, and he's seeing the subtle shades of difference between excitement and interest, between denial and refusal. Like that's part of the thing you like about what Rothfuss does with Kvothe. It's not, he doesn't just pick up these things. He studies them. He learns them. He practices them. He tries to figure it out. He immerses himself in these worlds and in these things. Like he does not just pick up sympathy. He immerses himself in it to the point where Abinthy is like, dude, you're going too, you're
too much.
Moving faster than I can give you the information. It's like you're advancing at an extremely fast rate because you're studying so hard and practicing it so much.
That's a really important thing to point out, because we get it too with Auxodal. It's not like he has to develop songs to remember all those linkages, right? Whatever the hell they are, the runes, right?
Yeah.
Just to create things that gives him the ability to remember all these things. Now, he is brilliant, but he works at it. It's not that again is a very important part of why this isn't an example of a Mary Sue, because he's not just capable of all these things. He has to spend time, work at it. And what his advancements here, first of all, he's advancing very slowly to their standards.
Yeah.
But he's been focused for many days now, where all he's working on is the Khatan. He's working on the understanding, or at least knowing how to talk about the Lithanian cheat, I guess he would say. Yeah. And then also, getting in, and working on the language as well, which again, he's still at a very rudimentary point, but he has some grasp.
Yeah. And I mean, by the time he leaves, it's not like he's proficient in any of the stuff. Yeah. He spends, a month or so with them. He spends like 40 some days or something like that, or 30 plus days, however long he's there. He spends a brief amount of time with them, and he immerses himself in the world and their culture and learning all these things. And he gets to the point where he can beat a girl that's 12 years old. He can beat her like 50% of the time. And he can speak the language better than, a child. Uh-huh. But he's not proficient in any of this stuff. It's not like they're sitting there looking at him like, man, you're really good at everything now. They're just like, yeah, if you stuck with this, you could eventually become good at all these things. But right now, we'll let you in the school is where he ends up. He's not a badass at any of the stuff. He might be a better fighter than some guys who don't, have had no training. And he is getting training at this place, which I do think there's something to Heart. It's not just a normal place, I don't think. So I think that helps him advance further. The access to the sleeping mind and that wildness, I think that helps in his training. But he's not like some ultimate fighter. In the first fight he gets into, he gets stabbed right away. And he would have died if it wasn't for his cloak.
What he is able to manage is he kind of, if I remember right, he does kind of blow their nips off with the tree, right? In terms of his ability, what he does.
Well, yeah, he called the name of the wind there.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
But that's not like being proficient in anything they do. That's doing something. That's magic.
No, my point is that would be impressive for them. But it's not like he advanced in something they're trying to teach him, which is how they gauge everybody in their society, is how good are they at understanding the Lithani or fighting or the Khatan. It's like they have their their measuring sticks, and
it's also interesting the fact that when he's got full access to the sleeping mind and the sleeping mind's in control, and he goes and he bleeds for them, like that's the time where they're like, this dude gets the Lithani. When the sleeping mind was running shit.
Yeah.
That's the time where they're like, this dude gets it. And they were all really impressed with his response at that moment, which again, I think lends evidence towards the fact that all this stuff is kind of tied together into the magic. The Lithani and the sleeping mind and the naming and all those are coming from the same place.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
But yeah, and then she's like, they after he's like learning the culture, he comes back to Vashet and it's like, there, Vashet said, twisting the stopper back into the bottle. How's that? She put the stuff on him to kind of soothe his skin.
You're skipping over the romantic ghost scene.
The romantic ghost scene?
Yeah, the movie Ghost. Where they...
Oh, and when she's just rubbing in the lotion. Yeah. Well, I like that when she's like, how's that? I could kiss you, I said gratefully. She's like, you could, she said, but your lip is swollen. You would doubtless make a mess of it. Instead, show me your Khatan. But I like that too, because like when she says you could, she's like, yeah, you literally could. I would let you. Like she's 100% down immediately. But Kvothe doesn't really notice anything there yet. But yeah, eventually she's going to make it pretty clear that she's not joking there.
Yeah, that will definitely come up. It kind of it's funny because it kind of reminds me in a way of why am I drawing a blank? Your girl with the rancid meat.
Oh, Debbie.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Debbie in the sense that she's always like, yeah,
yeah,
there's a bed back there.
Yeah. And then so he starts showing her the K10, and I love the fact that he goes through it and he's feeling good about himself because Tempe usually stops him before he gets to a certain point, and so he goes past that, and she hasn't said anything. Then he stumbles real bad, and she doesn't say anything, and he's like, "Oh, she's just letting me go through it all." And then when he finishes, Vashet stood stroking her chin. "Well," she said slowly, "it certainly could be worse." I felt a flicker of pride until she continued. "You could, for instance, be missing a leg." She's just constantly cutting him up.
Well, until she takes notice of those sexy ass hands.
Yeah, man, he's got those fine ass hands. Everybody loves them.
Everybody.
Yeah, she takes those hands. She's like, "Whoa, look at your hands. You have strong, clever hands with good motion in your wrists. What do you do for a living?" And he tells her that he's a student at the university. And he's like, "I'm also a musician. I play the lute." Bichette looked startled, then burst into laughter. She let my hands fall and shook her head in dismay. "A musician on top of everything else," she said. "Perfect. Does anyone else know?" "What does it matter?" I said. "I'm not ashamed of who I am." "No," she said. "Of course you're not. That's part of the problem." She drew in a deep breath and let it out again. "Okay, you should know about this as soon as possible. It will save us both a lot of trouble in the long run." She looked me in the eyes. "You're a whore." I blinked. "I beg your pardon?" It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
"I beg your pardon?" "Say what now?"
What the fuck did you just say? What excuse me? Yeah, no, I love, that whole, of course you're not. You should be. But that's, again, big part of the problem here is you think it's totally cool.
Yeah,
you're jerking off in public.
Yeah, she's like, "You had to have noticed the cultural differences with, Tempe." And then she's like, "Well, part of that's because Tempe has fewer wits than tits." But she's always cutting people down. It's hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's great. She's a great character, man.
Yeah. And then, and he is as fresh as a baby chick when it comes to making his way in the world. She waved a hand. "All that aside, you're right. There are huge differences. I noticed," I said. "You didn't seem to have a nudity taboo, for one thing. Either that or Tempe is a bit of an exhibitionist. I'd be curious how you found that out," she chuckled. But you're right. Strange as it may seem to you, we have no particular fear of a naked body. Here, it will be simpler to show you." And then she goes up to him. She's like, calmly, like, "You fight like a tiger," just kind of matter-of-factly. And he's like, "That's a compliment." And then she's like rubbing his arm, squeezing his muscles. "You fight like a tiger." It's like, that's a sexual advance. And I was like, "Hey, here you go, Kvothe. Starting to pick up on these things." And just prior to Flurrying, you would have had no idea what the hell that was. Yeah, I don't know. You're working on your grip. You're trying to strengthen your hand muscles.
He literally just says, "I don't know what you're doing. What are you doing?"
I don't understand, but I feel very uncomfortable right now, and I wish you would let me go. Yeah, I started to come into his own, noticing what a sexual advance is when it happens to him, where it's quite explicit. Well, not explicit, it's implicit, but it's quite obvious.
Yeah, it's quite clear. I do, I really like this stuff. I like this, like, she's showing something that's very intimate for them, and then she shows something that's very intimate for her people. And it's literally just like just using your voice in a way of like, well, I don't know.
But she's like, "Can you think of a single time you've heard one of us shout, raise our voice, even speak loudly enough we can be overheard?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "That is because for us, speaking is private, intimate, facial expressions too. And this," she pressed fingers to her throat, "the warmth a voice can make, the emotion it reveals, that is a very private thing. And nothing carries more emotion than music." I said, understanding. It was a thought too strange for me to cope with all at once. But yeah, so for them, because they don't talk loud, everything's private. They don't make emotions on their face. Singing loudly, expressing emotions with your face and with your words and with your body, like it's the antithesis of what they believe in.
Yeah, it's very we talked about it before. It's very uncomfortable when a man sings a song and he's all swaying and
I don't get uncomfortable when men sing. I tend not to like like love romantic songs. Like,
Yeah.
so like when the songs that make women swoon, like usually don't land with me at all.
I
But
typically find them to be some of the worst. Like pop
yes, it's
versions
not
of
my
that
thing.
is
It's not
just,
my thing at all.
man.
I don't, like that's not my type of music. But on the flip side, I'm listening to like Tupac and shit like that. So it's probably we're probably on that's a wide spectrum from Tupac to Michael Bublé or whatever his name is.
Well, you could say, I don't know, a favorite of yours, I'm sure, Baby Got Back, kind of a love song, right?
Oh yeah, I love that. Those kind of love songs are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, my anaconda don't want none unless she's got buns, son. Yeah, that's one of the most romantic lines in the history of music. But yeah, and then so she's like, that is because for us, speaking is private. But then she's like, a family might sing together if they are close. A mother might sing to her child. A woman might sing to her man. A slight flush rose on Vashet's cheeks as she said this, but only if they are very much in love, and very much alone. But he's like, but you? She gestured to me, a musician? You know, there's a whole room full of people all at once. And for what? A few pennies? The price of a meal? She gave him a grave look. And you do it again and again, night after night with anyone? I love the way she describes it, where it's just like the complete bafflement and disgust.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't understand how you do what you do for a living. Like, why would you do this? Why would you debase yourself this way? Have you no self-respect?
Yeah, man, it's very it comes on pretty heavy. And she describes it totally.
She shook her head in dismay and shuddered a bit.
Yeah, like the whole way she well, it's interesting too when she describes a woman might sing to her man and like her face flushes.
Yeah,
like so that's something.
Yeah, and then that is not what
or...
we see. When she talks about sex and having sex, like she's not some blushing bride type of girl.
No.
Like that's nothing to her. But the idea of singing, that shows you how different they view these things.
Yeah, it's like it's not. What's really interesting about it is it becomes like, so I guess one way to like view it is like their approach to the world is very clear and concise in terms of the way that they look at being able to focus on the K-tan and body movement and and fighting and all those types of practical things. But when it comes to like intimate emotions, it's all, I mean, it's not even in the language, right?
Yeah.
They remove it. So where you're not saying it, you're using your hands instead. You're still communicating it, but it's much less emotionally derived than if you're saying it with your voice. Then it's like she get blushes, right? She's like, so that intimacy is really interesting. And it actually does make some sense. I mean, to be able to voice it versus, gesturing something. It's you're kind of giving yourself room to be more cognitive, with the delivery of what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic. I mean, but it's just part of their culture, and it'd be interesting to hear more on where it came from. But I get it. Like when she told me like that they don't like to talk loud, they don't put emotions on their face and everything. So it makes sense given their culture.
Yeah.
Just I'm curious how the culture initially
evolved
began.
that way.
Yeah.
The when you mentioned she shudders a bit, she also goes as far as signaling or gesturing horror, disgust, and rebuke.
Yeah.
So like getting that, and then he goes as far as fighting off the mental image of standing naked on the stage of the Aeolian, then moving through the crowd, pressing his body to everyone there, young and old, fat and thin, rich, noble, and penniless commoner. It was a sobering thought. Like, yeah, I bet. You just played a song and you walked around rubbing your body up against people.
Why are you rubbing your genitals on everybody? Like, don't do that. Like, even the Adem don't do that.
I do
have no nudity taboo, but like Tempe's not walking around rubbing his genitals on your head.
I do like how though he still has to fight for it.
Yeah,
right? He's still like, but
play lute is the 38th position in the K-tan. Like such a weak argument.
Yeah.
Like, I love that she just comes back, and sleeping bear is the 12th. It's like, yet you will find no bears here, or lions, or lutes. But I like that aspect too, because then you get the little nugget where it's like some names revealed, the names of the K10 are meant to hide the truth, that we may speak of it without spilling its secrets to the open air. So it's an interesting tidbit. And it's also interesting that both they have their ways of expressing like their body movements and those kind of things in these playful ways. And Florian has the same type of thing. And the fact that they date back, 5,000 years. So, the tradition like that speaking, because who does that? Who talks like that? Like it has, describes, you got things like the rusty trombone and stuff, but that's just jokes. Like there's not people that like have a name for every like specific body movement. Yeah. It's not like when you're doing jujitsu, you're like, you have 37 movements and they got a special weird name for every single movement. It's a kind of a unique feature to, I could be wrong. I don't study jujitsu, so maybe they do have special names for every single movement, but it seems like the names would be there to, explain what the movement is in shorthand, not to hide the information. So seems like Florian and the Adem are like kind of have some similarities there. So I think it gives some kind of pointing towards that these two groups like came from the same type of place.
Yeah, I think it's like they're ancient, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that there is still, what's really interesting about that comparison you just gave is Florian is the natural source. She is the living, still living, young, like youthful expression of what she was originally. Just still living. With the K-Tan, with the way these stories, they're just tapped into it, and they maintain these stories. They're not immortals, right? They're just keeping the stories going, keeping it all together. And yeah, it's interesting. So it's like we were talking earlier. It's like the traditions and the stories, they mean something. 3 means something. Troopers and tinkers, they have meaning. They have power and influence. There's magic in what tinkers do, right? There's magic in what I think all these people do. What the Adem especially, but also Florian. There's magic in that tradition and following the tradition.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's part of it too. Like what you describe, those different steps, every single step may be in unison. Maybe it's like the cheat code for Contra, left, right, like that whole thing. That's, or the same thing for Mortal Kombat, right? Like back to whatever, up, down, left, right, that whole thing, and now you're spitting fireballs.
But yeah, and then so he tries to push it further. He's like, but you've been out in the world. You've seen, music isn't that bad. She's like, what would you call a person who has sex with 3 people in a row on the broad hearth of a busy inn? And she's like, he sits there and just says, I imagine the stone would be rather rough. And she's like, fine, they have a blanket. But at that point, he thinks back to Florian. He's like, man, if I'd stayed any longer with her, it's possible I wouldn't have thought anything of that. That taboo would have been gone. But I'd been back in the mortal world for a while now. A whore, I thought silently to myself, and a cheap and shameless whore to boot. And he's like, I was glad I hadn't mentioned Tempe's desire to learn the lute to anyone. Like, oh, dude, you're lucky. Tempe's lucky I'm not his friend. Because this would be information, like I would at least hang it over his head. Make him very uncomfortable for a while. Probably wouldn't tell anybody, but I'd at least make him think I was going to tell everybody for a while.
It's funny how he mentions it, like what it does to him, like how ashamed he must have felt for such an innocent impulse. Thought of a young Tempe wanting to make music but never telling anyone because he knew it was dirty. Broke my heart. So he's thinking about this. Why does he want
Tempe to whore himself out?
Well, I was going to say, he's thinking Tempe secretly wants to be a pretty woman. This is his dream, right? And they shamed him out of it. He's been hiding from himself. So once he got around the king whore, which is Kvothe, then he was like, teach me how to whore it up. Yeah.
But yeah, and then I like where he's like, how do you get your news? And she's telling him, we travel in the world and tinkers and people come by, and she's like, but occasionally someone comes by and they travel here. They carry these tall screens because they don't sing for everybody in public. It's for an individual family, and then they sing behind a curtain so that you can't look at them making their faces and making Tim all uncomfortable. But yeah, and then that relaxes him. He's like, I relax a bit. The thought of a place where no performer was welcome struck me as profoundly wrong, sick even. But a place with a strange custom, I could understand. Adapting to fit your audience is common as changing costumes to the Adem, which is a great, little tidbit of information that he puts in there, because that would be something that the Adem would have to be used to. Is that you're constantly going from town to town to town to town and traveling far distances. So the cultures would change dramatically. Even though the Adem, look at it, there's us and there's barbarians. It's not like that. Like Kvothe and Kvothe and Dedan are completely different. The culture in Ventus is different than the culture at the university. And so like there's vast differences between the groups of people. And so it'd be for someone like the Adem who are intermingling with all those groups and having to rely on the hospitality of all those groups, you would have to be able to adjust and modify your behavior to different customs. And so it's a good little nugget that he put in there about that.
His parents talked about that a lot. I mean, that was a very big sort of lesson that he learned at a very young age, was how you don't spend that much time in every individual place. You don't overstay your welcome,
Yeah. But yeah, and he's like, this is the way of things, and you would do well to accept it sooner rather than later. I say this as a well-traveled woman. I've spent 8 years among the barbarians. I've listened to music in a group of people. She said this proudly with a defiant tilt to her head. I've done it more than once. Ooh, you dirty, dirty girl.
Yeah, wow.
You have listened to music in a room full of people more than once? Wow.
She was at an album release party twice.
She's doing the old Pee Wee Herman, going to the old jerk-off movies.
What's it's really funny to picture where she describes that. It's like, when they do, so literally she's in a couple music videos where she's basically doing the twerk. She's twerking on a couple videos.
Yeah, that is one thing I can't see Vashet doing, is like twerking. Like the idea of it sounds hilarious to me. It's like just because her character is so not that.
No, yeah. But when she says like, I've listened with a group of people, so she's been at an album release party. She
was like sitting in a chair. Videos. Like there was girls that were twerking, and she was sitting in a chair, kind of shaking a little bit, like wanting to twerk, but like having to restrain herself. It's like she's not going full board twerking.
I feel like she would enjoy watching it. I feel like she would.
She was bouncing down up and down on that chair though. She was feeling it. She wanted to get up and twerk, but she's not going to go that far. But he's like, all I mean, I said quickly, is that you tried it. You might find it as nothing shameful. It is a great joy to everyone. I'm like, come on, just try it. Just the tip.
Well, one of the big things that he did mention was he asked her, "Have you ever sung in public?" And she went very serious. That is not a polite question to ask, and you will make no friends with it here. Like, not even just me. Yeah. Don't fucking say that shit.
Yeah.
That's extraordinarily intimate. So do not ask anybody if they've done that. Which is really funny, man. So like in our world, that's like, I mean, I guess it's literally like, how many people have you slept with? Or have you ever done the rusty trombone? I guess that's what that question is. That's the equivalent. You ever sung in public? So you've done the rusty trombone. Same thing.
Yeah. How many? And that's not even the right question. It's how many times have you done the rusty trombone? Everyone's done it.
Yeah, everyone's done it. This is your assumption?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Such a one of the grosser ones too.
Disgusting. Well, the funny thing is, like, I actually ended up like,
it's a hilarious, the idea, like when you hear the name of it, you're like, that's kind of hilarious, but the actual act is revolting to
me. So they all are. When you actually see, it's like, ugh, nobody's gonna do any of this shit.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
If a girl gave me a rusty trombone, I would never look at her the same again. It would be like, you just ruined. Yeah, you ruined yourself for me. Like I can never look you in the eye ever again.
Well, and then what's also interesting again is kind of what we get all over again is another culture where, wow, these fucking filthy Rue, they're disgusting. Okay. Right? I mean, it's kind of what it comes down to yet again.
Where did she say that about the Rue?
She didn't really say it about the Rue, but the fact that he is, man. I mean, that's what they're... That's,
well, the traveling musicians, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's not a bard, right? That would be the traveling musician. He is... Well, he was a performer, but now he is a musician. But
yeah, I don't know that they. Yeah, like I wonder what their view on plays would be. Like, I mean, that seems like it would be anathema to their society as well. Like, loud, boisterous displays of emotions and acting things out, scenes and that kind of stuff seems like it would be in a similar vein as music.
That's interesting, though, too. If you're a culture that respects stories, and that's a big part of what theater is. That's what plays are.
But they like stories where you just read it with no emotion,
with
and
no
everything
inflection.
Is very flat. Yeah, everything is flat.
Wow,
they don't like they hate when you do the voices. Like no, don't do that.
So
don't do that. Everybody has the same voice, same exact voice. Flat,
so
no emotions at all.
The only entertainment, if they had television in Adem, the only thing playing is Planet Earth with David Attenborough and nothing else.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that plays.
Yeah. It's got to be something like low volume. They're very low volume. They might even go turn on subtitles and just like we don't listen to
well, it's just David Attenborough whispering. A lot of them where he's just talking about Glacia. It's just he's got that little British voice and he's just whispering about glaciers and deer and little bugs.
When Scarpy comes to town and starts to tell their story, they're like, no, pull it back, reel it back in. Way too much expression. Your face is making funny. I can't concentrate. I'm laughing at you, you're kind of looking like a prostitute right now.
Dial it back. You're doing our story a disservice.
You're just telling a story, not having sex with everybody in the place. Get your shit together.
It's very, very odd.
Keep it in your pants, buddy.
So that's where it does get a bit odd, where it's like, so no entertainment. But they joke around and shit, but they're that makes them seem very stodgy. But then with sex, they're not at all.
No. Yeah, it's extremely weird. Like the entertainment factor for and they're funny. They're fucking funny.
Yeah.
Like where's the humor coming from? Like, oh, it's cool to laugh. It's like, man, you guys have like these weird loopholes that let you guys do what you want, and then not allow people to do what you don't want them to do.
Yeah, that's really. I keep making trying to give them credit for like, oh, well, I could see where that comes from. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, though, that's pretty inconsistent.
But yeah, maybe when they're in private in their own home with their own family, they're acting fools and making faces comedy. And
it's
everybody sits on a couch and like one person hops up and just starts making funny faces at everybody.
It's all Jim Carrey, dude. It's all Jim Carrey type of stand-up
over
comedy.
The top. Yeah.
Way over the top.
Very physical comedy, yeah.
Lots of pratfalls.
Yeah.
And they're all just dying laughing.
Like the Carrot Top probably was a member of the Adem. Like they probably loved his routine.
They're big into props?
Yeah. Prop comedy. Yeah, they love their swords and their weapons, and they're all about that kind of stuff. So they would be into, prop comedy where it's a very, physical, moving around type of thing.
I think ventriloquist.
Picking things up and trunk. Yeah, they would love ventriloquism. Yeah, because that is like their thing. It's like you're not moving your face. And it's the puppet is doing it.
He just keeps looking at him like, look at this guy. Look at.
Yeah.
So ridiculous.
So yeah, in private, yeah, they're a bit of they got some stand-up routines going on. But yeah, and then Vashet gave me a severe look and made a hard gesture of refusal and finality. Kvothe, I have traveled much and seen much. Many of the Adem here are worldly. We know of musicians. And to be quite completely forthright, many of us have a secret guilty fascination with them, much the same way your folk are enamored with the skill of the Modagan courtesans. She gave me a hard look. But for all that, I would not want my daughter to bring one home, if you catch my meaning. Neither would it improve anyone's opinion of Tempe if others knew he had shared the Catan with such as you. Keep it to yourself. You have enough to overcome without all of a dim ray knowing you are a musician on top of everything.
Yeah, so again...
And Casseret is going to spill the beans on him later on. And she puts his loot out under the tree.
So again, that's why I said, I mean, it kind of comes back to, like, you disgusting Rue. Like, yeah. I mean, it's more like, Kvothe, this is who you are. He's like, oh, I'm not ashamed of who I am. But in their culture, yeah, you should be. So, like, hide it, basically.
Yeah. You
have to tell everybody everything about you all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, keep it in your pants, buddy. I didn't see that here. You go flapping that around. But yeah, so what will we dive into next week? We will get more of their building their relationship and the training that he's going to go through with her, and then also I think we'll get the 99 stories from Cheyenne.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And then eventually we get, well, I don't know when exactly, but eventually we get a lot of verification of Scarpy's story, right?
With
and a little bit,
we get some with it's when she tells him about the Chandrian. She gives him the Chandrian name, and she tells about the falling of the 7 cities.
Oh shit, yeah, and all the names and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but that's when after he's already passed the test with them and would have been able to join their school. He asks Cheyenne if she would tell him about the Rintha, and so she ends up agreeing to tell him a story one time, and he's got to wait 1,000 days and travel 500 miles or something like that, or 500 days and 1,000 miles, something like that.
You have to wait for what?
Before he can repeat that story. They're like,
they got
saying these names around our shit, man. We're not trying to have Cinder over here playing his practical jokes where he rapes and kills our parents.
Murders everybody. It's a really practical joke.
Like, he thinks it's hilarious. I don't find it funny at all. I think it's mean.
Yeah. Think it's mean? Yeah, I think it's pretty mean. Yeah. Not very nice.
He thinks he's a big cut-up. And the Chandrian, they seem to really find him to be the funny guy. They were cracking up when he was playing his little joke on Kvothe. They thought he was being hilarious. Oh, yeah, look at him. They called him a little rabbit. It's like, it's so hilarious. Look at how sad he is. What, are you going to cry, little baby?
Yeah, where are your parents? Well, yeah, where could they be? Oh, is it that stripped off, did she burn? Did they burn?
Follow the trail of blood. No, they didn't burn him. They just chopped him up, killed him.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Looked like they stabbed him. And he did things to his mother. That's what he says. He did things to your mother,
Yeah.
Vicious things. Whatever he says. But yeah, that old Cinder, you don't want to call him. You don't want that guy coming around to your parties. Yeah, he's not an ideal party guest.
No, it didn't sound like he's a lot of fun. Sounds like he has fun himself, but at the expense of
I have a feeling
everyone.
like inviting Cinder to a party in their world is kind of like if you invite O.J. Simpson to a party in our world, where like everybody would feel real uncomfortable if like O.J. Simpson just showed up. You'd be like, what the fuck is going on here? Why did you invite him?
Oh, OJ, he's the best.
Huge fan. Like, don't worry, like Bill Cosby's coming right after him. He should be here in like 5 minutes. We're going to liven this fucking party up.
Bill's got them drugs, man. What is it? The Spanish fly?
Yeah. My dealer's going to be here in like 20 minutes. Dealer shows up as Bill Cosby.
Like, what the fuck?
All the girls immediately beeline it out of the place. It's like, no, I'm making cocktails. Don't worry, ladies. Stay.
I don't know. All the drinks, they're coming. Oh.
Yeah.
We're doing margaritas.
I'm a great mixologist. Oh, man. Bill Cosby. What a way to ruin a reputation.
What a character. He was such a character.
Yeah, he's a real cut up, that guy.
It's pretty insane. I mean, in my youth, as a young man, as a young boy, as a kid, I watched Cosby Show, growing up with my parents. And, he was funny.
He was a mass rapist at that time.
Yeah, he was probably going real deep at that time. I mean, he was...
How dark do you have to be doing that behind the closed doors and then to be like Mr. Pudding Pop Man, like in front of the cameras and everything? Like, you got to be a real sick fuck to pull that off. Like, how do you sleep at night? Like my conscience would be, I would never be able to sleep. I wouldn't be able to function, eat. I'd have like ulcers and I'd be dead. This dude, he's like he's going to live to be 150 probably.
Yeah. I wonder if part of that is like, who was it that used to talk about it? Bob Saget used to kind of talk about like doing the show Full House. It was so like saccharine and so like, middle America, nice, whatever, that it just was like killing him inside to like be that clean. So now
he was like a dirty, he was.
Well, that's what I mean.
Comic,
so it's sort of like, it's almost maybe it was the opposite, where it's Bill Cosby's like doing all this clean, pristine Jello pudding pop, doing the kids say the darndest things and all these things where he's totally surrounded by innocence and all that. And so he just, in his free time and his whatever,
super dark. But how would you function? Like, I mean, like, I just don't understand it. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, like, you just can't. You don't have any emotions, but you're an actor. Like, how do you pull off being like, this emotionless monster? And like, it's a crazy thing. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's wild. People are weird. People do some fucked up shit.
Yes,
people are crazy of doing crazy to see like some of the things people can do and like think about like what it would do to you if you did those things. Like, I could never do that. I don't even know how I would function. It's so fucked up. It's weird. I would not be Cinder. I would be, in this story, I would be more like Will or Simon. I wouldn't be Kvothe or Cinder. I couldn't be either of those guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, just thinking about like you said, just like one of those instances, you do one of those things, just like one of those despicable things where it's like your life from that point forward, you're never forgetting that you did this. No. That you went there.
Not spying. If you just kept going back to that well, like, the fuck, man.
Yeah, and then just like living as if as if things are normal.
Yeah, it's like everybody's calling you like fucking the America's dad.
Yeah, that's nuts, man.
Yeah, just total psychopath. But yeah, so on that note, go check out some Bill Cosby comedy.
Yeah, go watch Ghost Dad
go watch Ghost Dad and get some good wholesome action with the Cosby Show.
And just forget all the other things, or enjoy watching it and then just remembering underneath all of that after when they rap and they leave for the day.
It's kind of like the thing Alex Trebek called me a yo-yo for when I said, like, meeting a celebrity has no real upside because
this is the extreme version of it.
Either nothing changes and you just keep going on, liking their work, or they do something weird, or they're a jerk, or something that stands out where every time you see them from then on, you can only think of that moment. And with like Bill Cosby, I didn't even have to meet him, and now anytime I see him, I'm going to be thinking of that this dude's a serial rapist, and it'd be impossible to watch the Cosby Show without that, with turning that part of my brain off.
That was so funny too, because we're talking about it, and then you explain it, and the moment that you're explaining it, Alex Trebek comes up behind her and like grabs her on the shoulders, and he goes, "What? What are you guys talking about?" And then he hears it, and he goes, that guy's a yo-yo.
Yeah.
Proving your point.
Yeah. From then on. And then he also did the thing where like the the waitress dropped the tray of glasses, and everybody did the thing where everybody turns to look and see what happened because you just hear a shattering of glasses. And then he tries to be. He was such a goofy dude. He seemed like a good dude, but legit nerd guy, and perfect for Jeopardy. And then he steps in to throw one of those his dad jokes that he kept making, and he's like, "That's my Chardonnay," and does the little arm pump dang it.
The
and
perfect,
it was that was the corniest thing I've ever fucking seen.
The timing of all of it was insane because you got the crashes, and we've been watching that waitress. She was kind of, it was bound to happen. She was a bit unsure of herself. Anyway, we hear the crash, look, and then hear, "That's my Chardonnay," and then turn, and then see the
yeah. It was like a cartoon character.
Yeah, it was.
It's
just like
cracking me up. I was like, he's going out of his way to make my point.
Yeah, it was just one of those moments where what the hell just happened, man? The whole sequence was just what in the shit? Yeah, it was pretty great.
The year before that was the William Shatner one, where we had a buddy sitting there watching, and every time Shatner would come around, because it was a celebrity race, and every time Shatner would come around, he would fishtail on this turn, and we were like, he's definitely gonna wreck. And eventually one time, he fishtailed into a car and then drove straight at us and moved the brick wall back a foot. And he hit it so hard. And then two cars had to dodge him, and they wrecked, and one of them caught on fire. So both those cars were totaled. And then he just backs up and straightens up and then waves to the crowd. Everybody cheers, goes nuts. And then he just drives off and kept going. Just went back to racing.
Nearly killed somebody. That's great.
Yeah, it was hilarious, man. I was like, what? I was like, this dude, man, he's the Mr. Showman too. Just immediately sticks his hand out the window, waves to the crowd. Dude, get your hand back in your car, you jackass.
Yeah, that was no joke. I mean, those cars are going super fast.
Yeah. That was a fun event. That little Grand Prix. But yeah, so we will be back next week with the 99 stories. So
boom.
We will see you then.
Yep.
Peace out.
Mm-hmm.